Of course, then there are those people who claim to have total recall, what are called eidetic memories. In fact, they don't remember everything. I remember watching a series on PBS called The Brain, and they profiled this famous restaurant owner in Washington, D.C. named Jacques Scarella. This man had a legendary capacity to recall patrons' faces and where they sat and exactly what they ordered. But he couldn't tell you the names of the streets he passed on his way home. But one of the most respected authors in speculative fiction claims to have a picture-perfect memory. Just how far back does your memory go?
Well, I have total recall going back to the moment of my birth. And a lot of people say, oh, come on, that can't be. Well, I think if you look at all my short stories, you'll see that the recall is a very important part of many of them. But I verified the truth of this when our first child was born back 42 years ago. And we brought her home from the hospital, our first daughter, and she was in the crib and try and lift her head and take a look at us, you know. But 3 or 4 nights into her, the first week being home from the hospital, she woke in the middle of the night with a nightmare, right? And it was a nightmare. And I turned to my wife and said, I know what this is. She said, what? I said, she's had a nightmare. My wife said, about what? She's only 6 days old. I said, about being born. I said, I remember lying in my crib in the first week and remembering being born. That's the only nightmare you've had. Huh? All of a sudden you're out in the open. You're not warm and cuddled and kept by the fluids. Huh? And bang, you're out in the open. And so I had a series of nightmares in my crib. So I called my mother the next day. I said, I want to check a few things with you. I said, how many days after I was born was I circumcised? She said, 6 days. I said, it wasn't at the hospital, was it? She said, no. I said, and it wasn't at our home? No. I said, did my father take me somewhere? Did he take me downtown? She said, yes. I said, did he go upstairs, huh? To the doctor's office? Yes. I said, I remember being laid on the table. I remember the doctor bending over me with a scalpel, huh? Now, there's no way for that to get in here, see, because I was born in a Victorian period. There are still parts of America that are Victorian in the morals or not talk. I never heard my mother or father swear in their life. They never discussed sex. I knew nothing about these things. And that's the way things were in the 20s, way up into the 30s. So there's no way for this memory to get in because my mother was not going to say, listen, kid, you were circumcised when you were 6 days old and you sucked. Yeah, good, that's embarrassing. And you're not going to talk about it with relatives in front of the kid. And you can't teach your son the pain of the circumcision that I remember. Huh? So I wrote a short story about it called The Small Assassin. And I've had arguments with scientists about it. I said, hey, you know, I've experienced this. You haven't. You can't tell me it didn't happen. I can't prove it, but the visual information I have is too strong.
Not to mention the physical evidence. Whether or not you believe a human brain could store all the experiences of a lifetime, science fiction has had almost as much fun with eidetic memory over the years as it's had with memory loss. Also, Megan Lindholm's novel, Alien Earth, which takes place after the ecological destruction of Earth, in a future where even information biodegrades so that civilization can avoid information overload. Unfortunately, for the alien named Tug, what's often lost are the rare Earth books that he collects. Luckily, Tug has other means of holding on to the past. Why did you give your human character, Rafe, total recall?
Because there were so many things that I wanted to put into this book, that if Rafe didn't have total recall to be able to dredge all this up, it would seem awfully funny trying to bring in all this detail of what life had been like for him on Earth before he migrated. So I wanted him to have just a vast amount of recall at his ability. Also, it was the one thing that made him valuable to Tug. It was the only reason Tug had for keeping him alive was because he did have total recall. He could recall verbatim every book that had ever been read to him. And of course, some of these books maybe were Dr. Seuss or little golden books or whatever, books that would not necessarily have been preserved for posterity in the official archives. So in Rafe, he had a library that nobody else had access to.
What were the consequences to Rafe of having this strange ability?
I think that some things were more painful for him than they were for others, and whereas I know I have repressed a lot of things from childhood, I think he had to live with a larger burden of pain than other people did, because he recalled things so vividly and in every detail.
Terry, why did you give your character Brother, who is the temple gardener in Small Gods, an eidetic memory?
I could give you a long explanation for that, but I think I would probably end up saying because it seemed like a very good idea at the time.
Okay, I was just asking because I thought it might have something to do with your fascination with computers and the fact that computers don't forget.
Computers forget all the time. Years ago, I think I'd done the last draft of Mort, and I printed it off and I sent it to the publishers. And then, because it was late at night, I think I gave some kind of screwed-up command to the computer, and it wiped the novel. Now, fortunately, I'd printed it off, and in fact, I think I'd done it, it not only been printed off, it had been put in the post. So the only copy of the novel that existed was in the postal system somewhere. So I phoned ahead to the publisher, and my editor sort of waited on the doorstep for the mailman to bring it, you know, we can take 10 photocopies. I use computers all the time. You know, my accountant said to me the other day, you know, because the tax man was on to him, you know, do you need 7 computers? I said, no, I need 19. You know. But all they are glass typewriters. I mean, there's, you know, I don't love computers. I just say that to get them into bed.
Wham bam, thank you, Ram. So, computers forget too, eh, Nancy? I guess you were hoping I wouldn't remember to run that quote, huh? Luckily, I never forget anything. I have a mind like a steel... The opening credits? That's right. Usually I remind you to run the opening, and this week I decided to see if you could remember on your own. I was testing your memory, that's all. And you failed. Well, you better run them now. Come on, quickly, before we lose power.
Rising anti-Semitism in Eastern Europe.
Overly inflated. Until next week, I'm Enrico Gruen. And even past that, I'm Enrico Gruen. Next week on Second Nature, people who've lost their jobs to computers talk about their anger and frustration in a special report, Take This ROM and Ram It.